Today's guest recently fought a battle against debt and won. But what's next? This sounds interesting, doesn't it, Andrea? Welcome to the show, Andrea and Benji. Andrea, let's start with you. Tell me your story.
Okay, well, I have quite a story. I've been sharing it in the community for 5 years. I'm executive director of the Bipolar Disorder Society of British Columbia. But my story goes back 14 years when I had a mental health breakdown. And so it was quite a crisis for me because when it comes to finances, during that time, I ended up losing everything.
Oh, how terrifying and scary.
Yeah, definitely scary. So being hospitalized, and then because of bipolar disorder, quite often people will make bad judgments, especially about finances. So it was, spending credit cards, not knowing the consequences, and then losing my job. It was very tough. And then it took some time, but I took a lot of steps to rebuild. And one of them was going to South Korea and teaching English for 2 years, but I ended up going there for trying to escape, and being really afraid of the situation that I got myself into.
So were you feeling that you could just run away from it all?
Yeah, I wanted to heal. I was just not content with being in Canada, but also debt collectors wanting to deal with the situation that I got myself into.
So was your phone ringing off the wall?
Definitely.
Did it get nasty?
It did. It really did. And then when I left to South Korea for 2 years, they were even still looking for me and sending me emails. And when I came back, I decided, I want to deal with this. And so I ended up getting a full-time job, which was really great with the government, started making more money. And then I contacted Benji because I really wanted to find a way to get help.
So did you find, though, that you had to get your head cleared and healthy again before you were ready to face, okay, now how do we deal with this situation?
Well, definitely. First, it came to the acceptance of having bipolar disorder and taking away that self-stigma where I was ashamed. And then the next steps definitely came with getting medical help through a psychiatrist, doing the many things that I needed to do to stay well. And it was once I had the full-time job that I was making fairly good money, then I was able to take next steps to really try and get out of debt, in which I am debt-free today.
Oh, congratulations. And I guess that's where Benji came into play. Benji, tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure, yeah. I work with a company called 4 Pillars Consulting, and we help people reduce their debt. And I got into this business myself, kind of was introduced to it by one of my own financial reversals that I've suffered. So
you've been there too? I've
been there too, which is what's great. I can relate to people, and we don't judge is the main thing. So I suffered a big financial reversal many years ago. And I found myself making less money, and then debts accumulate quickly, so we quickly sold off all of our assets, and that's not a lot of fun. But after all the sale of all of our assets, there's still leftover debt. So I found a way out without bankruptcy, and that's how I was introduced to 4 Pillars, and being able to settle up with my creditors just sat a lot better with me than walking away.
Wow.
And so now I get to help other people do the same thing, protect their assets before they're all gone.
Which is great. And when it comes to getting into debt, it's not always as simple as it seems. Like a lot of people just assume, well, you're just spending too much. And that's not really the case, is it? I mean, you had a very specific example of what caused you to spend, and you weren't healthy at the time.
No, definitely. And I think a lot of people don't realize that at times it's not your fault.
Yes, it's not your fault. And now that thanks to Benji giving you some advice, you were able to get yourself out of that hole. How are you feeling now?
Well, really amazing, because Benji and I, we put together a debt restructuring proposal for my situation. And he worked very, very hard with me to ensure that my debt got reduced from $75,000 down to $30,000.
Wow.
And I was able to pay that off within 1.5 to 2 years.
Good
and then
for you.
Once it was completely paid, it was amazing, because now in 9 months, I won't even have a mark on my credit, and I've already reached a credit score of very good.
So what's your big question for me then?
Well, I'm looking forward, right? And I want to establish myself in a bigger way. I want to get a mortgage, but I look back at my credit history and I'm wondering, how do I do that?
Well, there are ways to rebuild your credit to get a mortgage. and I'll help you with that. So don't go away. Learn how to build credit to get ahead after the break.
The Wealthy Life is brought to you by investment dealer Raymond James. Life well planned. See what a Raymond James advisor can do for you.
Welcome back. We're about to help Andrea build credit so she can eventually buy her own home. You know, Andrea, before we get into some of the tips on how to rebuild your credit, I want to just touch on a little bit further why people get into debt in the first place and how their debt gets or their credit gets damaged. Benji, you have a lot of experience in this area. What are some of the things that you see? Why do people get into debt?
Right, yeah, there's a lot of stigma around it, like that everybody just went on a wild spending spree, but that's not the case. A lot of times it's just from a sickness, loss of job, divorce. All these things cause debt, and mental illness is really strongly linked to debt. So 25% of people with a mental illness end up in debt, studies suggest.
Wow, and I don't know what the current stats are with mental illness, but I know they're quite high. I mean, it touches so many people, and seems to be getting more and more the case, and it's not your fault. It's not something that you have control over. So what exactly is debt restructuring? Because you got out of your debt through debt restructuring versus bankruptcy. Benji, I want you to touch on that a little bit.
Sure, yeah, it's the process of reducing the debt, so it brings the overall principal of all the debts down, and it generally brings the interest rate down to zero, and it allows people to get out and keep their assets while making a smaller payment back to the banks. So they still pay some money back.
You know, if I'm a creditor and I've lent money to someone and they're going to declare bankruptcy and I'm not going to get anything, a debt restructuring plan where I at least get something would be more appealing, and it's kind of a win-win for both parties.
That's right.
So now you've got through that, you want to start moving forward, and this is where I get excited to help people build their wealth, and now you're at this stage in your life, you're gonna do it. You're gonna buy a place.
I specifically want a condo in Vancouver.
Okay. Well, you're setting your bar pretty high.
Yeah.
Have you seen the cost of those things?
Yeah, definitely, but I seem to set the bar high for many things in my life.
I like it. Why not just go for it?
Yes.
Right.
So as far as getting your credit rebuilt again, there's a few things that you need to start doing. Have you got a credit card right now?
Yes, I have 2 secured credit cards. That was recommended by Benji to start establishing my credit again. And it was really great because I was able to get a store card that basically gave me a higher limit and was unsecured. So it seems like slowly but surely things are building again.
It is good, and not everyone realizes that you can get a credit card with a really small limit on it, and then use that credit card every month, but pay it off in full every month. I'm sure you're terrified of getting back into a situation that you were in before. You don't want to go back there again.
No, definitely not.
How about from a working perspective? Are you able to start saving some of your income?
Oh, definitely. And it's been really great because since I've paid off the consumer proposal, I have been able to save the money that I was allocating for those number of years towards paying it off. So I become accustomed to putting aside that money for the proposal, but now it just goes into a savings.
Great, which is going to create an extra buffer for you. But if you're worried about dipping into that again at a future part, because you don't know what your health is going to do, hopefully you don't go back there again. But if you do, maybe consider putting some of that money into RSPs or tax-free savings account, locked in GICs, things you can't easily get your hands on, and work with a financial advisor to secure it. Another tip for rebuilding your credit is you want to make sure you pay off all your bills in full every month. And if your bank will allow you to have a little bit of a line of credit just in case, so that your bill payments can come out automatically so you never worry about forgetting it, you'll have that little buffer so that your bills are paid. Now, it may create a little bit of a debt in your bank account, but pay that off too. Just keep on top of it. It is critical. If you start doing some of those things and continuing to save as you're saving, start building up a big down payment, because you're going to need a huge one if you're going to buy a condo in Vancouver. You'll be well on your way to getting a mortgage and building up a high net worth.
Excellent.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And stay tuned, because up next, find out how to come up with your own personal giving strategy and why it's important.